Ranch incident in the remote basin lands of northeastern Utah lies a property so strange, so inexplicably haunted by the unknown, that it has earned a name that sends chills down the spines of paranormal researchers worldwide: Skinwalker Ranch. This 512-acre plot sits on what the native Ute tribe considers cursed land. For generations, the Ute people have refused to set foot on this property, warning of ancient, malevolent entities they call skinwalkers, powerful medicine men who, through dark rituals, gained the ability to transform into animals and terrorize their enemies. But our story truly begins in 1994, when Terry and Gwen Sherman purchased this scenic ranch to raise cattle and build a peaceful life with their children. What started as an American dream quickly descended into a waking nightmare. On their very first day at the property, the Shermans encountered a wolf-like creature unlike any natural animal. This massive beast, with reddish fur and intelligent eyes, approached the family fearlessly. When Terry shot the creature multiple times at point-blank range with a powerful rifle, the bullets had no effect. The creature simply walked away, disappearing into the landscape as if mocking their very conception of reality. This was only the beginning. Over the next 2 years, the Sherman family documented over 100 inexplicable incidents. Their prized cattle began turning up mutilated. Surgical precision cuts removing specific organs, with no blood at the scene despite catastrophic wounds. The animals' eyes, tongues, reproductive organs, and rectums were removed with technology that seemed beyond modern surgical capabilities. One night, Terry witnessed 3 bright blue orbs moving methodically through their pasture. The objects seemed to be scanning the ground with beams of light. When he approached to investigate, one orb broke formation and moved directly toward him, causing him to flee in terror. The family regularly observed unusual lights in the sky, some as large as football fields, hovering silently over the property before accelerating at impossible speeds. Inside their home, they experienced poltergeist-like activity. Objects would disappear from one location and reappear in another. They heard disembodied voices speaking unintelligible languages. Their dogs refused to venture into certain areas of the property and would sometimes go missing, never to return. Perhaps most disturbing were the apparent intrusions into our reality. The Shermans reported seeing shimming doorways of light appear in mid-air, what some researchers would later describe as portals. On multiple occasions, they observed creatures emerging from these gateways, including a being that resembled a large reptile and another described only as something that looked like nothing they had ever seen before. By 1996, the Sherman family had endured enough. Frightened, exhausted, and unable to maintain their ranching business amid the chaos, they put the property up for sale. This is where our story takes a fascinating turn. The ranch was purchased by billionaire Robert Bigelow, founder of Bigelow Aerospace and the National Institute for Discovery Science, NIDS. Bigelow had a long-standing interest in paranormal phenomena and, unlike most wealthy individuals with such interests, was willing to apply rigorous scientific methods to its study. Bigelow assembled a team of highly credentialed scientists, physicists, biochemists, veterinarians, and former military personnel, who maintained a constant presence at the ranch for nearly 8 years. They installed sophisticated surveillance equipment covering every inch of the property. They collected soil, water, and air samples. They performed necropsies on mutilated animals and documented every anomalous event with scientific precision. What they found defied explanation. The team documented dramatic fluctuations in electromagnetic fields that corresponded with visual phenomena. They photographed unexplained lights and observed objects that would become transparent or change shape. Some team members reported being followed by glowing orbs that seemed to exhibit intelligence. Others described feeling an unseen presence watching them, even in broad daylight. Dr. Colm Kelleher, a biochemist who spent years at the ranch, recalled an incident where he and other researchers watched a yellow light expand in the sky until it was the size of a football field, then contract to a pinpoint and disappear. Their equipment registered massive electromagnetic spikes during the event, ruling out conventional explanations. In another documented case, researchers tracking an unusual light with night vision equipment watched as it transformed into what appeared to be a large, black humanoid figure that crawled through a fence before vanishing. What makes the Skinwalker Ranch case particularly compelling is what happened next. In 2007, the public learned that the Pentagon had been secretly funding research at the ranch as part of its Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, AATIP. The U.S. government had spent millions of tax dollars investigating the phenomena at this remote Utah ranch, according to former Senator Harry Reid, who helped secure the funding. The program discovered things that were not necessarily unnerving, but surprising and compelling. The exact findings remain classified. The ranch has since changed hands again, now owned by real estate mogul Brandon Fugel, who continues to allow scientific research on the property. A team led by Dr. Travis Taylor, an astrophysicist who has worked with NASA and the Department of Defense, has documented new phenomena, including radiation levels spiking to dangerous levels in specific locations, then returning to normal minutes later, unexplained acute medical symptoms affecting researchers, including temporary blindness and cognitive effects, objects moving on their own, captured on multiple camera systems, unusual aerial phenomena that exhibit 5 observable characteristics that defy conventional aircraft: anti-gravity lift, sudden acceleration, hypersonic velocity without signatures, low observability, and transmedium travel. Perhaps most disturbing is the pattern many researchers have noted. The phenomena seem to respond to human observation and intention. As one investigator put it, whatever is here, it seems to be watching us as much as we're watching it. The Skinwalker Ranch remains an active site of unexplained phenomena today. Despite decades of scientific investigation, including the application of the most advanced monitoring technology available, no comprehensive explanation has emerged. Is it extraterrestrial activity, interdimensional beings, undiscovered natural phenomena, true, or, as the Ute people have long believed, something ancient and malevolent that has always been there? Whatever the truth, one thing remains clear. In this remote corner of Utah, the conventional rules of reality appear to bend, if not break entirely. And despite our advanced technology and scientific understanding, some mysteries remain beyond our grasp, watching us from the shadows as they have for generations. The mysterious disappearances of national parks the United States National Park Service oversees. 85 million acres of preserved wilderness, from the fog-shrouded forests of Olympic National Park to the ancient canyons of the Grand Canyon. These are places of stunning natural beauty, drawing millions of visitors each year who seek connection with America's wild spaces. But beneath this postcard perfection lies a disturbing pattern that the National Park Service rarely acknowledges. People vanish in these parks. Not just a few individuals, but thousands. And they disappear under circumstances so strange, so inexplicable, that they challenge our fundamental understanding of reality. David Polides, a former police detective with over 20 years of experience, never intended to uncover this mystery. His investigation began when National Park Service employees approached him anonymously, concerned about the unusual nature of disappearances they had witnessed. What started as curiosity evolved into a decades-long investigation documenting over 1,600 cases of people who vanished under circumstances that defy conventional explanation. What makes these cases so disturbing isn't just their number, but the bizarre patterns that connect them. Consider the case of 6-year-old Dennis Martin. In June 1969, Dennis was playing with other children at a family gathering in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. His father watched as Dennis planned to playfully sneak up on the other children. Dennis circled behind a bush just 30 yards away and never emerged. Within minutes, a massive search operation was launched. Over 1,400 people joined the search, including Green Berets, FBI agents, and National Park Rangers. Despite this being one of the largest search operations in U.S. history, no trace of Dennis was ever found. No clothing, no remains, nothing. Despite his disappearing in an open area with family members just yards away, 2 miles from where Dennis vanished, at roughly the same time. A family reported seeing a wild man carrying something over his shoulder moving through the forest. The Park Service never connected these reports to Dennis's disappearance, and the lead was never properly investigated. This case exhibits several of the patterns Palides has identified. Children who vanish in seconds, even when under direct supervision, disappearances near creeks or rivers. The absence of scent trails for tracking dogs to follow missing persons who seem to have vanished into thin air. Leaving no physical evidence in 2011, 18-year-old Chris Fowler disappeared while hiking the Pacific Crest Trail in Washington state. An experienced outdoorsman, Chris vanished during a snowstorm. Despite extensive searches, no trace was found until 3 years later, when a single boot, confirmed to be his, was discovered miles from his last known location, in an area previously searched multiple times. The rest of his remains or belongings have never been recovered. Perhaps most chilling are cases where victims are found, but in ways that defy explanation. 3-year-old Jared Atadero vanished in 1999 while hiking with a church group in Colorado's Comanche Peak wilderness. Despite hundreds of searchers combing every inch of the area, no sign of the boy was found. 14 months later, his remains were discovered 550 feet above the trail on a nearly inaccessible rocky outcrop that experienced adult climbers would find challenging. More disturbing still, his clothing showed no signs of typical decomposition or animal scavenging, despite being exposed to the elements for over a year. Then there's the case of 24-year-old Stacia Ross, who vanished in Yosemite National Park in July 1981, while on a mule riding trip with her father and others. She walked a short distance to photograph Sunrise Lake, remaining in full view of the group. Moments later, she had vanished. Despite intensive searches, only her camera lens was ever found. How could a young woman simply disappear while being observed by multiple people in an open area? The patterns continue with disturbing consistency. Bodies found in previously searched areas, sometimes lying in the open, missing persons discovered in impossible locations, requiring them to have climbed steep terrain that even experienced mountaineers would find challenging. Children found miles away from their disappearance point, having traversed terrain that would be difficult or impossible for them to navigate. Strange clusters of disappearances in specific geographic locations over decades. A disproportionate number of victims who are of German ancestry or have disabilities. What makes these cases even more unsettling is the apparent unwillingness of federal authorities to address the pattern. The National Park Service does not keep a comprehensive database of missing persons in their jurisdiction. When Palides filed Freedom of Information Act requests for information on these cases, he was often told the records didn't exist, had been lost, or would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to produce. Why would a government agency be reluctant to acknowledge or investigate a clear pattern of unusual disappearances on land they manage? What could possibly explain this institutional silence? Some park rangers have spoken anonymously about being instructed not to discuss missing persons cases with the public to avoid creating panic. Others have shared stories of being explicitly told not to use the word predator when discussing these disappearances, despite evidence suggesting something is indeed hunting in our national parks. The explanations for these disappearances range from the mundane to the extraordinary. Conventional theories suggest these are simply cases of people becoming lost, suffering accidents, or encountering criminal elements. Yet these explanations fail to account for the bizarre patterns, the missing scent trails, the discoveries in impossible locations, the bodies found in previously searched areas, the strange removal of clothing, particularly shoes and pants, whom more unconventional theories propose. Unknown species of predators living in remote wilderness areas, underground cavern systems where victims fall or are dragged interdimensional portals that temporarily open, pulling in those who are nearby cryptid creatures from Native American lore that patrols certain territories, extraterrestrial abductions targeting specific genetic profiles. Native American tribes across the country have their own explanations. Many have legends of areas they refuse to enter, places they call where the bad spirits live, or places of no return. The Navajo speak of skinwalkers, the Lakota of walking tall entities, and numerous tribes tell of stickmen who lure humans to their doom. For thousands of years, indigenous peoples have warned of entities that guard certain lands and take those who trespass. Is it possible they knew something we've forgotten? Except whether the explanation is conventional or beyond our current bush just 30 yards away and never emerged. Within minutes, a massive search operation was launched. Over 1,400 people joined the search, including Green Berets, FBI agents, and National Park Rangers. Despite this being one of the largest search operations in U.S. history, no trace of Dennis was ever found. No clothing, no remains, nothing. Despite his disappearing in an open area with family members just yards away, 2 miles from where Dennis vanished, at roughly the same time. A family reported seeing a wild man carrying something over his shoulder moving through the forest. The Park Service never connected these reports to Dennis's disappearance, and the lead was never properly investigated. This case exhibits several of the patterns Palides has identified. Children who vanish in seconds, even when under direct supervision, disappearances near creeks or rivers. The absence of scent trails for tracking dogs to follow missing persons who seem to have vanished into thin air, leaving no physical evidence. In 2011, 18-year-old Chris Fowler disappeared while hiking the Pacific Crest Trail in Washington state. An experienced outdoorsman, Chris vanished during a snowstorm. Despite extensive searches, no trace was found until 3 years later, when a single boot, confirmed to be his, was discovered miles from his last known location, in an area previously searched multiple times. The rest of his remains or belongings have never been recovered. Perhaps most chilling are cases where victims are found, but in ways that defy explanation. 3-year-old Jared Atadero vanished in 1999 while hiking with a church group in Colorado's Comanche Peak wilderness. Despite hundreds of searchers combing every inch of the area, no sign of the boy was found. 14 months later, his remains were discovered 550 feet above the trail on a nearly inaccessible rocky outcrop that experienced adult climbers would find challenging. More disturbing still, his clothing showed no signs of typical decomposition or animal scavenging, despite being exposed to the elements for over a year. Then there's the case of 24-year-old Stacia Ross, who vanished in Yosemite National Park in July 1981, while on a mule-riding trip with her father and others. She walked a short distance to photograph Sunrise Lake, remaining in full view of the group. Moments later, she had vanished. Despite intensive searches, only her camera lens was ever found. How could a young woman simply disappear while being observed by multiple people in an open area? The patterns continue with disturbing consistency. Bodies found in previously searched areas, sometimes lying in the open, missing persons discovered in impossible locations, requiring them to have climbed steep terrain that even experienced mountaineers would find challenging. Children found miles away from their disappearance point, having traversed terrain that would be difficult or impossible for them to navigate. Strange clusters of disappearances in specific geographic locations over decades, a disproportionate number of victims who are of German ancestry or have disabilities. What makes these cases even more unsettling is the apparent unwillingness of federal authorities to address the pattern. The National Park Service does not keep a comprehensive database of missing persons in their jurisdiction. When police filed Freedom of Information Act requests for information on these cases, he was often told the records didn't exist, had been lost, or would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to produce. Why would a government agency be reluctant to acknowledge or investigate a clear pattern of unusual disappearances on land they manage? What could possibly explain this institutional silence? Some park rangers have spoken anonymously about being instructed not to discuss missing persons cases with the public to avoid creating panic. Others have shared stories of being explicitly told not to use the word predator when discussing these disappearances, despite evidence suggesting something is indeed hunting in our national parks. The explanations for these disappearances range from the mundane to the extraordinary. Conventional theories suggest these are simply cases of people becoming lost, suffering accidents, or encountering criminal elements. Yet these explanations fail to account for the bizarre patterns, the missing scent trails, the discoveries in impossible locations, the bodies found in previously searched areas, the strange removal of clothing, particularly shoes and pants, whom more unconventional theories propose. Unknown species of predators living in remote wilderness areas, underground cavern systems where victims fall or are dragged interdimensional portals that temporarily open, pulling in those who are nearby cryptid creatures from Native American lore that patrols certain territories. Extraterrestrial abductions targeting specific genetic profiles. Native American tribes across the country have their own explanations. Many have legends of areas they refuse to enter, places they call where the bad spirits live, or places of no return. The Navajo speak of skinwalkers, the Lakota of walking tall entities, and numerous tribes tell of stickmen who lure humans to their doom. For thousands of years, indigenous peoples have warned of entities that guard certain lands and take those who trespass. Is it possible they knew something we've forgotten? Except whether the explanation is conventional or beyond our current understanding. One fact remains undeniable. People continue to vanish in America's wilderness under circumstances that defy explanation. Families are left without closure, searching for loved ones who seem to have been swallowed by the land itself. The next time you visit one of America's beautiful national parks, take a moment to look beyond the stunning vistas and tourist trails. In the shadows between the trees, in the unexplored caverns and remote valleys, something may be watching, waiting for the next person to step just far enough from the path. And perhaps the most disturbing question of all, why doesn't the government want us to know about it? The Bridgewater Triangle in the southeastern corner of Massachusetts, between the towns of Bridgewater, Freetown, and Rehoboth, lies a 200-square-mile region that has terrified New Englanders for centuries. The indigenous Wampanoag people called one part of this area Hockomock, meaning the place where spirits dwell. Early colonists named another section the Devil's Swamp. Today, paranormal researchers have a different name for this cursed zone, the Bridgewater Triangle, first officially documented by cryptozoologist Loren Coleman in the 1970s. The Bridgewater Triangle represents something unique in the annals of paranormal research, a single geographic area where virtually every type of unexplained phenomenon has been reported, documented, and witnessed by thousands over centuries. At the heart of the triangle lies the Hockomock Swamp, minus 6,000 acres of dense, foreboding wetland that remains one of the largest natural swamps in New England. Early settlers avoided this place, claiming to see strange lights and hear disembodied voices calling from the mist. Today, it remains largely unexplored, a primordial landscape barely changed since the last ice age. The modern catalog of horrors associated with the Bridgewater Triangle began in 1970, when multiple residents of Bridgewater reported seeing a thunderbird, an enormous bird with a wingspan exceeding 10 feet, circling above the town. Local police received dozens of calls about the creature, which some described as looking prehistoric. In 1976, 2 children in Abingdon encountered a creature that would become one of the Triangle's most infamous denizens, a bipedal, ape-like entity nearly 7 feet tall with glowing red eyes. When it noticed the children, witnesses say it ran into the swamp, moving with inhuman speed. Similar creatures have been reported throughout the region for decades, with local newspapers documenting multiple sightings. The same year, residents of Rehoboth reported something that seemed to come from another world entirely, a massive triangular craft hovering silently over the town, illuminating the night with blinding white light. Before police could respond, the object shot straight up and vanished. This wasn't an isolated incident. The Bridgewater Triangle has one of the highest concentrations of UFO sightings in America, with waves of reports occurring every few years. What makes the Bridgewater Triangle unique isn't just the diverse phenomena reported there, but the consistency of these reports across generations. For over 200 years, residents have documented orbs of light that move with apparent intelligence, often pursuing vehicles on the region's dark roads, thunderbirds, and giant, prehistoric-looking birds that shouldn't exist in North America, Bigfoot-like. Creatures stalking the swamp's ghostly hitchhikers who vanish from moving vehicles. Cattle mutilations, identical to those reported in western states, disappearances of both people and animals. Poltergeist activity in homes throughout the region. One of the most frequently reported phenomena occurs on Route 44 near the Rehoboth-Seconk line, where dozens of motorists have encountered a phantom hitchhiker, a red-haired man who appears on rainy nights. Those who stop report that the man enters their vehicle, sits silently, and then vanishes completely while the car is in motion. In the town of Freetown, adjacent to the swamp, residents along Copycat Road frequently report a red-headed phantom that appears in the road, causing drivers to swerve. At least 3 fatal accidents on this stretch have been attributed to drivers trying to avoid this apparition. Perhaps most disturbing are the reports from Freetown State Forest, 5,000 acres of woodland within the Triangle. This area has witnessed horrific crimes that seem to reflect the land's malevolent influence. In 1978, the body of Marilu Arruda, a 15-year-old cheerleader who had been abducted, was found tied to a tree in the forest. Her killer, James Cater, claimed to have no memory of the murder and described lost time during the period when the crime occurred. In 1980, the Fall River cult murders shocked the nation when police discovered that a satanic cult led by Carol Drew and Robin Murphy had murdered 3 young women in ritualistic fashion within the forest. Court records indicate the killers believed the forest amplified their rituals due to its powerful energies. Even today, Freetown State Forest Rangers report finding evidence of occult rituals, animal sacrifices, inverted crosses, and altar-like structures deep in the woods, away from established trails. Is there a connection between the paranormal activity and the violence that seems to plague this region? The Wampanoag people believe so, according to tribal historians. The swamp was the site of a great battle during King Philip's War in 1676, when hundreds of indigenous people were slaughtered by colonists. The tribe believes the spirits of their ancestors remain trapped in the swamp, angry and seeking vengeance. Others point to evidence that the region sits atop a massive quartz deposit, a mineral some paranormal researchers believe can store and amplify psychic energy. Geological surveys confirm unusual magnetic anomalies throughout the triangle, with compass readings becoming erratic in certain locations. Professor John Brianty of Bridgewater State University conducted a 5-year study of the region beginning in 1994. measuring electromagnetic fields throughout the triangle. His findings, published in the Journal of Anomalistic Science, documented unexplainable energy surges, concentrated around sites with the highest reports of paranormal activity. In 2013, documentary filmmaker Erin Cadio released The Bridgewater Triangle, featuring interviews with dozens of witnesses, including law enforcement officers, university professors, and skeptics who had personal encounters within the region. One of the most compelling testimonies came from Bridgewater Police Sergeant George Wilesdale, who described responding to a call in the swamp in 1999. "What I saw that night wasn't anything natural. This wasn't an animal or a person. It moved through the trees faster than anything I've ever seen, and when it looked at me, I felt, I don't know how to describe it except pure fear. I've been in dangerous situations before, faced armed suspects, but this was different. Tisht. This was a fear that felt ancient. I won't go back in there, not even on duty. Something's in there that shouldn't be." Today, the Bridgewater Triangle remains an active paranormal hotspot. Reports continue to flood local paranormal research groups. Amateur investigators who venture into the swamp often return with inexplicable photographs, EVP recordings of voices that weren't present, and stories of overwhelming dread that forced them to leave. Is the Bridgewater Triangle merely a concentration of folklore and imagination, fueled by the region's undeniably eerie atmosphere? Or is there something about this land, something ancient and perhaps malevolent, that manifests in ways we cannot fully comprehend? Whatever the truth, one fact remains undisputed. For generations, this corner of Massachusetts has been a nexus of the unexplained, a place where the veil between our world and something else seems perilously thin, and for those who live within its boundaries. The phenomena aren't folklore or urban legends. They're a disturbing reality that persists. Despite our modern skepticism and technology, as local historian Roger Desmarais puts it, something wants to be noticed here. Whether it's the land itself or something on it, it doesn't just want to be remembered. It wants to be feared. The Chicago O'Hare UFO incident on November 7, 2006, at one of the busiest airports in the world. Something impossible happened in broad daylight, witnessed by dozens of credible observers. It wasn't reported on the evening news. It wasn't investigated by the FA. It was, in the words of one witness, like it never happened at all. Chicago's O'Hare International Airport handles nearly 2,200 aircraft operations daily, with over 83 million passengers passing through each year. On that cold November afternoon, United Airlines Flight 446 was preparing to depart for Charlotte, North Carolina. The weather was overcast, with a solid cloud ceiling at 1,900 feet brick at approximately 4:15 p.m. A United Airlines ramp worker handling baggage was stunned to see what appeared to be a metallic, disc-shaped object hovering above gate C-17. The object was dark gray, perfectly circular, and appeared to be spinning while maintaining a stationary position. Thinking he was hallucinating, the ramp worker radioed his supervisor to come look. Within minutes, at least a dozen United employees, including pilots, flight attendants, and management, had gathered to watch the bizarre craft. It hovered silently below the cloud ceiling, clearly visible to everyone in the vicinity. What makes this sighting particularly compelling is not just what was seen, but who saw it. These weren't anonymous witnesses or individuals with questionable credibility. These were airline professionals, pilots with thousands of flight hours, mechanics who could identify every aircraft in service, managers trained to handle emergency situations with cool detachment. One United Airlines pilot, who requested anonymity for fear of professional repercussions, described the object. "It was definitely not an aircraft that I've ever seen before, and I've been in aviation for over 20 years. Then, without warning, The disk accelerated vertically at an incredible speed, punching a clean circular hole through the solid cloud layer above. The cloud hole remained visible for several minutes afterward, slowly closing like a healing wound in the sky. Several pilots reported seeing this unusual atmospheric phenomenon, including the crew of an aircraft on final approach. In the air traffic control tower, controllers saw nothing on radar. When contacted by United supervisors about the object, they insisted nothing unusual had appeared on their screens. No unauthorized flight was in progress. No weather balloon had been launched. According to official channels, nothing had happened. And there the story might have ended. Another unexplained sighting lost to time and bureaucracy. But something unusual happened next. On January 1st, 2007, nearly 2 months after the incident, the Chicago Tribune published a front-page story by transportation reporter John Hilkovich about the O'Hare sighting. Hilkovich had received tips from United employees frustrated by the lack of official acknowledgement. When Hilkovich contacted the FAA for comment, their response was dismissive. The incident was likely a weather phenomenon and no investigation was planned. But after the Tribune filed a Freedom of Information Act request, the story changed dramatically. FAA spokesperson Elizabeth Isham Corey now acknowledged that an FAA manager at O'Hare had indeed received a call from a United supervisor about the sighting and had casually dismissed it without filing a report. This directly contradicted the agency's initial denials that they had any record of the incident. Why would the Federal Aviation Administration, an agency whose primary mission is ensuring the safety of our skies, show so little interest in an unknown object hovering over one of America's busiest airports? Why the initial denial followed by reluctant acknowledgement only after legal pressure? Richard N., a former NASA research scientist who specialized in aircraft safety, found the FAA's response particularly troubling. When you have an object reported over an active airfield, with multiple professional witnesses observing it for several minutes, that should trigger immediate security protocols. The fact that it didn't suggests either incompetence or a predetermined policy to ignore such reports regardless of witness credibility. The O'Hare incident occurred during a period when UFO stigma was particularly strong in the aviation community. Pilots who reported unexplained aerial phenomena often faced professional ridicule or concerns about their mental fitness for duty. Many avoided filing official reports, instead sharing experiences only with trusted colleagues. This changed dramatically in 2017, when the New York Times revealed the existence of the Pentagon's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, AATIP, a secret government initiative investigating precisely these types of encounters. Suddenly, what had been dismissed as impossible for decades was being taken seriously at the highest levels of military and intelligence communities. In the years since the O'Hare incident, several United Airlines employees who witnessed the event have spoken out, though most still request anonymity. One former United mechanic revealed, "We were told not to talk about it, not directly threatened, but it was made clear that the company didn't want this getting attention." As one O'Hare air traffic controller who was on duty that day put it, "Whatever it was, it shouldn't have been there." And the fact that nobody official seemed to care is more disturbing to me than what we saw. Something that can hover motionless, then accelerate faster than any known aircraft, directly over an international airport, should have triggered every alarm we have. But it was like it never happened. In the years since, the U.S. government's approach to such phenomena has evolved significantly. In 2021, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence released a preliminary assessment on what they now term Unidentified Aerial Phenomena, UAP, acknowledging that some reported incidents involve technologies beyond our current understanding. But for the witnesses at O'Hare that November afternoon, No official acknowledgement or explanation has ever been provided. They saw something impossible in the skies. Above, Chicago, something that challenged their understanding of reality, and were met with silence from the very institutions responsible for identifying and addressing such anomalies. Perhaps most disturbing is the question that lingers unanswered. If this happened once, in broad daylight, with dozens of witnesses, how often might it be happening when no one is watching? The unexplained death of Elisa Lam in downtown Los Angeles stands a building with a history so dark, so steeped in tragedy, that it earned the nickname Hotel Death. The Cecil Hotel, opened in 1927 as a luxury destination, quickly fell into disrepair as the Great Depression transformed its neighborhood into the infamous Skid Row. Over the decades, the Cecil became known for suicide, murder, and inexplicable events. Serial killer Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, lived on the 14th floor during his killing spree in the 1980s. Austrian killer Jack Unterweger stayed there while murdering sex workers in 1991. Numerous guests have ended their lives by jumping from its windows or ingesting poison in its rooms. But in 2013, the Cecil Hotel would become associated with perhaps its most disturbing mystery yet: the inexplicable death of 21-year-old Canadian student Elisa Lam. Elisa arrived in Los Angeles on January 26, 2013, as part of a solo trip along the California coast. A bright, creative University of British Columbia student with a passionate online presence, she documented her travels on her blog and social media. She checked into the Cecil Hotel, by then operating partially as a budget hostel, called Stay on Main, planning to stay 3 nights before heading to Santa Cruz. She was last seen by hotel staff on January 31st, when she failed to check out as scheduled and her parents couldn't reach her. They contacted the Los Angeles Police Department, who launched a missing persons investigation. During the search, officers discovered something deeply unsettling: the last known footage of Elisa, captured by the hotel's elevator security camera on the last day she was seen. She steps out of the elevator, makes strange fluid hand gestures that some have interpreted as ritual movements, then steps back in. Throughout the video, she appears to be speaking to someone who isn't visible in the frame. At one point, she steps out again, wildly moving her hands as if having an animated conversation with an unseen person. The elevator doors remain open throughout this bizarre performance. Eventually, she walks away, and the elevator doors finally close. The video ends with Elisa disappearing down the hallway. It would be the last time she was seen alive. For nearly 3 weeks, Elisa's whereabouts remained unknown despite extensive searches of the hotel and surrounding areas. Then, on February 19th, guests at the Cecil began complaining about issues with the water supply, low pressure, discoloration, and a strange, unpleasant taste. CSA maintenance worker Santiago Lopez was dispatched to check the rooftop water tanks. What he discovered would horrify the nation and transform the Elisa Lam case from mysterious disappearance to nightmare. Inside one of the 4 1,000-gallon water tanks that supplied the entire hotel, Lopez found Elisa's body floating face-up in the water. She was completely naked, with her clothes floating alongside her. Hotel guests had been unknowingly drinking, bathing in, and brushing their teeth with water contaminated by her decomposing body for 19 days. The discovery raised immediate, disturbing questions that have never been adequately answered. How did Elisa access the roof? Hotel management insisted the door to the roof was kept locked, with alarms that would trigger if opened. Additionally, reaching the water tanks required climbing a ladder and other obstacles. How did she get into the tank? Each tank had a heavy metal lid that would be difficult to move, especially for someone of Elisa's small stature. Why was she naked? Toxicology reports found no evidence of sexual assault, yet her clothes were floating in the tank with her, suggesting she had undressed either before entering or while inside. Most perplexing of all, how could she have closed the heavy tank lid from inside? Tickles. When maintenance workers discovered her body, the lid was closed, a seemingly impossible feat for someone already inside the tank. The Los Angeles County Coroner's Office ultimately ruled Elisa's death an accidental drowning, noting she had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and suggesting her medication might have contributed to her behavior. They theorized she had climbed into the tank herself during a psychotic episode. But this explanation leaves crucial questions unanswered and ignores key evidence. Toxicology reports showed no drugs in her system other than her prescribed medications, and those were at subtherapeutic levels, suggesting she might have been undermedicated. Multiple hotel employees stated they had checked the roof during the initial search for Elisa, including looking at the water tanks, and saw nothing unusual. Access to the roof required bypassing multiple secured doors and alarms. Yet no alarms were triggered, and security footage never showed Elisa accessing these areas. The bizarre elevator video showed her appearing to hide from or speak to someone not visible on camera, suggesting she might not have been alone. Adding to the mystery are the eerie coincidences surrounding her death. The 2005 horror film Dark Water features a plot with striking similarities. A young woman dies in a rooftop water tank, contaminating the building's water supply, with residents experiencing discolored water coming from their taps. During the search for Elisa, a tuberculosis outbreak occurred on Skid Row, blocks from the Cecil Hotel. The test used to identify this specific TB strain was called La Melissa, an unsettling echo of her name. Several guests who stayed at the Cecil during this period reported paranormal experiences, unexplained noises, feelings of being watched, and electronics malfunctioning, particularly on the 14th floor, where Elisa had initially been staying. The internet quickly seized on these elements, developing theories ranging from murder cover-ups to paranormal possession. Some pointed to the Cecil's history of housing killers, suggesting Elisa encountered someone dangerous in the hotel. Others noted the building's reputation for paranormal activity, proposing she had been influenced by malevolent spirits. Armchair detectives dissected every frame of the elevator video, noting that,